Well, hello there. My name's Jonathan Doyle, and I am really pleased that you're going to take a moment to come and check out this keynote presentation that I recently had the pleasure of delivering in the Archdiocese of New Orleans. This was a really special day put together by the wonderful Dr. Raynell Houston, the Superintendent for Catholic Education, and her fantastic team at the Office of Catholic Schools. We had several thousand Catholic teachers in the room and many more joining us on live stream, and it was an absolute privilege to be there. I think this presentation captures my real heart for Catholic education, for the incredible work that you do every single day. And I want to offer you some insights, some tools, some strategies that are really going to help you to flourish in this beautiful vocation. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope it is a blessing to you. And thank you so much for what you're doing every single day in Catholic education. All right, friends, let's press on. We talked about doing some research. Ready? Let's do this together. Let's talk about what modern education's like. I ask you two questions. Show of hands. We run the results. You tell me what things are like. First question. How many of you in this room believe that over the next decade, pressures from government, pressures from parents, pressures from the wider society around mandates and curriculum and parental expectations and pressures and pressures from the wider society, literacy, numeracy, all that stuff, how many of you here believe that those pressures are going to get less? In 3, 2, 1, show of hands. Now, I failed math in high school, but I'm going to take a stab at that. I'll just put that in the system here. Second question. How many of you in this room believe that the issues facing students, pastoral care, mental health, anxiety, depression, self-harm, body image, dysmorphia, impact of social media, how many of you believe that the pastoral issues that you will see in young people are going to decrease? Show of hands in 3, 2, 1. Well, I failed maths in high school, but we just pop this in 2. We're going to find that the answer, of course, is 0. So, friends, we could say we have a problem, right? And this is the part where some of you are going, I thought he was a motivational speaker, but what do we do? So what I do, if you're taking any notes, is I talk about something I came up with a few years ago called the simple equation. What is the simple equation? Concentrate, listen. An environment of increasing complexity and demand existing simultaneously in an environment with finite time and resources. You got that? An environment of increasing complexity and demand, that's the school you're in. Increasing complexity and demand, finite time and resources. You cannot manufacture more time. You can tweak on the edges of effectiveness, but it's a marginal gain. So if I could demonstrate this for you, this is a rubber band. This is what I think happens to a lot of teachers. Watch this. Friends, it was meant to be more dramatic than that. It broke really fast. Some of you are sitting there going, we're going to break that fast? But it's like teachers get stretched and stretched and stretched and stretched, and some break. So friends, can we agree that we have a complex and challenging situation in modern education, right? So what are we going to do? Well, I'm going to give you a couple of ideas. The first thing I need you to understand, and this is useful for any area of your life, from now on, if you ever face a complex and challenging situation, I'm going to teach you 3 things. You only ever have 3 options. Option 1, you can leave it. Option 2, you can accept it. Option 3, you can change it. Best I can tell, that's you've only ever got 3 options in your life when things are difficult. Leave, accept, or change. Leave, accept, or change. Let's spin through them quickly. Let's start with leave. Should you leave? And this is the part where usually the bishop or the superintendent goes, we paid you to be here. Friends, I don't want you to leave. Why? Because I'm going to believe genuinely that you are called. If you've been called into this work, that's a whole other talk I do, but I genuinely believe that you are not here by accident. You want to believe that the God of the cosmos, the one who flings galaxies from his fingertips, sustains the entire cosmos in being under immutable laws, and your career is a coincidence. Well, was he really busy that day? So I genuinely believe that you're called. And if you are called into this vocation, please understand, please hear me. Guess whose problem it is to sustain you in it? Bishop in Boise once said to me, he said, Jonathan, teachers have got to stop trying to make Jesus unemployed. I don't want you to leave. Why? Because we genuinely need you. We genuinely do. If you go, if you leave, what have we got? Who's left? I was in Oklahoma City speaking, and I got to go to the Blessed Stanley Rother Shrine. And if you don't know anything about him, he was a native of Oklahoma City, and he became a priest, and he spent all his time working in South America with the poorest of the poor, had a real love for these people, my friends, a real heart for these people, just like you have a heart for yours. Just as you have a heart for your students, he had a heart for these people. And there was all sorts of problems. There was Marxist guerrillas, and his people were getting killed, and he was under all this pressure. And they kept saying to him in Oklahoma, Stanley, you need to come back. You need to leave. You need to leave, Stanley. It's not safe. You need to leave. But if you go to his shrine, you will see this written everywhere. It's profound. It just stayed with me. You know what Stanley Rother said? He says, the shepherd does not run. So let's not run. Let's not leave. Stay at your post until God clearly tells you to go somewhere else. And he will, because he cares about you. Option 2, accept it. Friends, should we just accept it? Should we just sit here today and go, well, teaching's really tough, the kids are getting more difficult, but what are we going to do, right? What else are we going to do? We just got to learn to accept it. And the risk of that is that you can end up doing something very unfortunate, which is learning to accommodate a quiet and tragic despair. It's real quiet. It's a real subtle one. It's just like, meh. It's just, meh. This is what it is. Kids are like this. It's never going to change. Some of you know exactly what I mean. You're like, you're just a step away from cynicism. What's the point? Does it even matter? So friends, please listen. I need to talk to you about something really important, and I need to talk to you about something that nobody else wants to talk about. It's a really uncomfortable topic. I want to talk to you specifically and deliberately, just for a couple of seconds, on the devil. No one wants to talk about that, but just bear with me. This will make sense. You see, if you look at the original Hebrew, when we use the word Satan, it's not pronounced Satan. It's actually pronounced Satan, and it's not Satan, it's actually the Satan. Do you want to know what the Satan was? The Satan translates as, this is important, the tempter, the one who tempts. You see, in the Garden of Eden, he didn't murder anybody. Not straight up, he didn't attack outright. You know what he did? It was just a temptation. You see, when Jesus came out of the waters of the Jordan, it wasn't a frontal attack. What was it? It was a temptation. And it's always the same temptation. It's always the same temptation, and this will make sense. Please hear this. It's always the same temptation. You can't trust him. He's not who he says he is. He doesn't see you. He doesn't care. He doesn't notice. You can't trust him. And if we end in that place, he will whisper to you the ideal temptation for you. He will whisper to you the ideal temptation. Could be ambition, but usually it's like despair or despondency, or it doesn't make a difference. Can I keep doing this? Just a little whisper, just a little whisper. But we've got to call him out, and we've got to push back. And you need to make sense for me of Jeremiah 29, where Jeremiah says, the prophet says, I, the Lord, know the plans that I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. If you are struggling in there, do you think it's God's plan? Do you think he was like, hey, I see you. I've got a great vocation. Come over here. It's a really awesome vocation. Now, you're in the vocation. That's really good. Good luck with that. He clearly says that he will prosper you and not harm you. He will give you hope and a future. Do you think he was just talking to me? Why wouldn't that promise hold for you? That's special that the promises of God do not apply to you, and that you are supposed to navigate the challenges and complexity of modern teaching on your own. We will not leave. We will not accept. So my friends, I want you to join me today. We're going to make a change. And this is good, because if you want to change something in your life, if you want to change your teaching, if you want to change your marriage, if you want to change your parenting, if you want to change anything in your life that is not working the way you want it to work, there are 3 things you need. I'm going to teach you these really quickly. We'll touch on the first 2. We're going to go deep on the third. If you take your notes, you need 3 things. State, story, strategy. State, story, strategy. Let me take you through them. You want to change something in your life? The first useful thing to do is to be in a good state. And you go, that's random. What's that got to do with us? Well, put it this way. Is it not true that you come up with many of your best ideas when you're feeling pretty good? I'll give you an example. On Saturday, here in the great state of Louisiana, I was dragged against my will. No, I wasn't. I was taken to a special religious event. It was the Lord's anointed Louisiana State Tigers. Go Tigers. Playing a game of football. You may have heard of LSU. And I want you to imagine that if you support that team, or any team that you support, I want you to imagine that you get to the national championship game. Just imagine this with me. If you're not into sport, just think of something similar. I want you to imagine the scores are tied with just a few seconds to go, and you're just standing there, and then there's this Hail Mary pass, and it's caught, and it's a touchdown, and they win the national championship. Right at that moment, you are not standing there going, well, that was good. Go Tigers. You are losing your mind. You are hugging strangers. You are kissing people you don't even know. You're just like, ah! If I come to you at that point and say, hey, you know that problem you had in your life? Can we talk about that? I've got some ideas for you. You'd be like, yes, yeah, we can fix anything right now. Because you're in a good state. So when your physiological state's good, you make good choices. Give you the contrasting example. I want you to all imagine with me right now how you feel approximately 5 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day. You're lying on the floor somewhere and you're thinking this. You're praying because you're holy people. You're like, baby Jesus, take me now. And your brain's just there going, why? If I come to you at that point and say, hey, let's talk about how you're going with teaching. Let's talk about how you're doing. You'd be like, why do you torment me? Because you're in a low state. Okay, so you with me? I'm not going to go any further with this, but I just want to say that we need you in a good state. So please take some attention to your general level of well-being. Food, diet, exercise, water, sleep. I take these things really seriously. Really I do, because of the travel that I do. I try and keep myself in good shape so I can serve. So just state. All right? Now it gets really good. Story. You want to change something? You want to become the teacher that God's really called you to be? You've got to get the right story. You're sitting there going, I don't understand. What do you mean by story? That's abstract. Friends, do you know what your story is? Your story is your meta-narrative, your overarching belief about the story that you think is happening in your life. Now, all of you are sitting there going, I don't really think about it much. Exactly. You don't think about it much. In fact, most people never do. So let me give you an example of certain stories that people can live. Dr. Houston and I were talking about one this morning. People that grew up in the Great Depression. Many people, understandably, lived a whole lifetime in a scarcity story. Hold on to everything. You could lose it at any second. Don't really step out and have too much fun because everything could fall apart. That's a scarcity story. I don't judge anybody. It makes sense. But is it not possible, friends, that you could live an entire lifetime in a scarcity story? You could live in an inadequacy story, which is I'm inadequate because when I was young, someone said you're too tall, too short, too skinny, too big, too pretty, not pretty enough. You all know exactly what I'm talking about. Some of us learn very young that whatever we are, it is not enough, and it probably never will be enough. Victim story. Two people can go through exactly the same trauma. One person can be crushed in a victim story for the rest of their life. One person can live in an overcomer story the rest of their life. Why? It's a mystery. Orphan stories. What's an orphan story? It's the orphan spirit. God doesn't see me. He's busy. He doesn't notice. My problems don't matter to him. I've got to figure this out on my own. That's an orphan spirit. So friends, what I need to do desperately, because I may never see you again, is what I'm going to try and do right now is put every single person in the room in the right story. Because you can't be the teacher that God wants you to be if you're in the wrong story. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put your story into God's story. What does that mean? This is really interesting. I only came across this in the last 6 months from some seriously interesting theologians. Can I offer you this? I don't know, you probably never thought of it. Do you understand, my friends, that God, throughout the whole cosmic and salvation history, is only telling one story? What do you mean he's only telling one story? We've got creation, he's doing all this other stuff, and there's prophets, and he established a church, and there's one story. Well, what story is that? It's very simple. Friends, you need to understand the entire history of God's story is this. Ready? It's 2 words. Come home. It's redemption. That's it. You go, okay, what's that got to do with us? Well, it's got this to do with you. Firstly, I want to give it scriptural basis, because I never just want to rant on your stage and leave without always having scriptural basis for what I'm doing. Jesus himself tells us, so if you disagree with my suggestion, you will need to take it up with him. Jesus simply said what? The Son of Man came. Why'd you come, Jesus? Oh, you want to know? I came to seek out and to save what was lost. Come home. So try this if you're taking notes. Ready? The Father wants his kids back. The Father wants his kids back. That's all it is. That's all it is. And try this if you're still struggling to grasp it. If you have a child, whatever age your child is, imagine when they were young if they had been kidnapped. Imagine if your child had been kidnapped, right? And it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon of the day they've been kidnapped. Do you find yourself sitting in front of the television saying to yourself, well, they'll turn up? Can you imagine what that would be like? You would not sleep. You would not eat. You would not be able to function until your child was back in your arms. And if you can feel that, can you imagine what the heart of the Father feels? Your story, friends, is in his story because he has called you into his story. He wants his kids back. And what looked like a classroom to you is nothing more than a battlefield. For the hearts and the futures of young people, you are called into his story, and it is an extraordinary story. And when I was working on this, I thought to myself, friends, do you understand that if you discover your story, if you really get this, if you go, he's right, this is what I'm actually doing, do you know what you end up with? 2 things. You end up with purpose and you end up with significance. You end up with purpose and you end up with significance. Every single day you can get up and you'll go, well, it's hard, it's difficult, but I know why I'm here. Mark Twain said it this way. This is a really good line. He said, the 2 most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you discover why. See, I spent years of my life wanting to do something else. I grew up poor. I grew up really poor. And I didn't want to be poor, so I worked all the time and I built things and I was in finance, I'm doing all these other things, and I spent years. I was doing some of this, but I was always trying to be somewhere else. I was always trying to be somewhere else. And then more recently I just went, oh, you just want me here. And can I tell you the peace that comes into your life? The peace that comes into your life when you go, oh, this is why I'm here. Almost done. It's 2 hours to go. We have locked the doors. Quick summary. When things are difficult, what do you got to do? Leave, accept or change. We ain't running, we ain't accepting, we're changing. When you want to change, you need state, story, strategy. Let's go to strategy. So friends, here's what I'm offering. My observation is that many people, when things are difficult, run a strategy to try and change it. Most people are running 2 strategies. I'm going to suggest you really stop doing them. And then I'm going to show you a third that is going to be really helpful, God willing. Number 1, most people run a strategy of some form of despair, despondency, surrender. It's like, well, what can I? We've talked about that, right? It's like, And you go, how could that be a strategy? Well, you just accommodate it. You just accommodate it. You just slowly listen to the tempter. Now, I'm not saying you put up with difficult circumstances. You're intelligent people. But we get to this point where we're like, it's just... And you run that strategy. Where I come from, friends, it's endemic. You have something special in this country and you really need to fight for it, because there are plenty of places in the world that do not have what you have in terms of the belief and why it matters. So don't give in to that strategy. Now, this is the important part, the second strategy that most people are running. Most people are doing something. I'll tell you the word. It'll sound complex. I'll explain it to you in a couple of seconds and we move on. My observation in the last few years have been that many, many good Christians are doing something as a strategy called Neo-Pelagianism. Neo-Pelagianism. What is it? Pelagius was a monk around the time of St. Augustine. His real name was actually Morgan, but if you're going to invent a massive heresy, you need a cool name, so he's called Pelagius. Pelagius had this really simple idea. He just looked at the cross and he said to himself, you know what? If Jesus went to the cross, then he must have done everything necessary for us to live right. Now, like every heresy, there's some good truth in that. But then Pelagius went a step further and he said, you know what? If we're not living right, it can't be Jesus' fault. It must be ours. Which is technically kind of true. But then you know what it led to? A theology of striving. I'm going to work harder, I'm going to work harder, I'm going to work harder. So many good people in this room, under the challenges you face, you'll look around and you go, what shall I do? Well, I just guess I've got to work harder. I've got to push harder. I've got to try and do more. And you get tireder and you get tighter and you get anxious or depressed because you're like a duck on a pond with the little legs going crazy underneath, but still on the top. It's like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. So friends, if I could offer you this today, you've got to stop, I've got to stop. We need to stop trying harder. And you're like, well, what do we do? Einstein, like you've taken everything we could possibly do. You got anything else? I really do. And what I'm about to suggest to you, friends, I've been praying so hard because I don't think I don't know how to teach it. It's really hard to teach, but if you get what I'm about to offer you as a strategy, it can change everything. And I'm going to demonstrate it to you with a live example. When I was invited to speak at the NCA convention, we had 10,000 people in the room. It was a big deal, right? But we had a little problem. And the problem was that I came from a background of profound abuse, trauma. We could compare notes, but if you could just think of everything that could happen to someone, that. By 15, I was sleeping in parks. And by 15, I finally began living in a Salvation Army home. Now, the result of that was PTSD and panic anxiety disorder and generalized anxiety disorder, and I would say decades of depression gone. But the panic anxiety stuff was the worst, which is kind of a problem if you're a speaker. So when the panic attacks were bad, I could sometimes end up in a position like this and I'd be like, because I had the PTSD stuff, I had to control. Not people, just the room. I had to control. I had to make sure that I could control the room. I had a death grip on life. I was a high functioner. Nobody knew, except Karen had a front row seat to 20 plus years of it. Now I look all normal to you, but friends, like some of us sitting here, so in God's great cosmic sense of humour, I get invited to do the NCA Keynote. And just before I go on stage, I'm sitting in the front row and Karen's sitting next to me. And just before I go on stage, Karen stops and she said, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. She said, are you nervous? I said, well, it's the funniest thing. No, I'm not really nervous. I said, why do you ask? And she said, well, I'm terrified for you. I said, why? And she said, well, you could walk up there and have a panic attack and just freak out in front of everyone. I'm like, would you stop? Just stop. Bible says you're meant to be a divine aid. You are not aiding me right now. And she said, really, you're not scared? And this is what happened. I turned to her, I said, I'll tell you the truth. I said, if God has brought me all the way here to put me on that stage and to publicly embarrass me and end my career, I said, well, that would be weird, but at this point, I got nothing left. So friends, the president of the NCA does my introduction, and what Karen was getting at is there was a very good chance at St. Louis that I could have come up the stairs right here. Because of the PTSD and the anxiety and the trauma and all the stuff, I would just be like, where's the fire alarm? And so what happens is this. Now I'll show you the photograph. You can see it in real time. That pops up in a sec, hopefully. You're going to see if it pops. That's the exact moment that I was healed. Gone. The most transformative moment of my life. Why? Because as I came up the stairs, I suddenly just went, I don't think I can do this. There was nowhere to run. And right at that moment, I'm like, I have nothing. And if you don't show up now, I'm done. And right at that moment, God just showed up and just I went to your cathedral yesterday, and God is so generous. He put this on my heart from Psalm 18, because I can't do it justice. So I'll tell you what happened as I was standing there in St. Louis. Psalm 18. He reached down from on high and took hold of me. He drew me out of deep waters. He rescued me from my powerful enemy. What enemy? I don't know, 20 years of anxiety, depression, PTSD. They confronted me in the day of my disaster, but the Lord was my support. He brought me out into a spacious place. He rescued me because He delights in me. And I could never believe that He could delight in me. I could never believe that I was the Father's. Never. Just never. No, I couldn't do it. But friends, so here's what I'm trying to tell you. When I got to that moment of complete incapacity, it was right at that exact moment that the power and the presence of God showed up. So what I'm trying to teach you is if you will reorient the entire basis of your life to stop trying harder and to completely abandon yourself to the presence and provision of God for you in every single moment. And the reason I am here telling you that is because I was the most qualified to never do it. So what does this look like in practice, right? In practice, as you're walking to your class and it's difficult, you're like, Lord, help me. Just help me. Help me. Just help me to be what you need to be. Just help me every single day. Help me, help me, help me. And just do it over and over. And I know this is the problem, right? How simple does this sound? Everybody wants something really complex. It's this simple. Is your life really hard? Cool. Help me. Do you want to understand, friends, the peace in my life right now? I'm here to testify there is a peace. I don't care anymore. If I never speak again, I'm good. Every problem I have, I'm all over the world at the moment. I got a sick kid in hospital. I've got all these complex business. I'm good. Why? Because I have learned to make my problems His problems. So that's all you have to do. Just make your problems His problems. And you're all looking at me and some of you go, you got anything else? No, this is it. But just in case you're not sure, I'll give you one last thing to help you here. While I'm getting this up, ask yourself the question, who was the second greatest Christian in history? Second greatest. Now at this point, it's always funny because a lot of people thinking, well, you got Jesus. No, Jesus was not a Christian. He can't follow himself. There's some Trinitarian dimensions to that, but anyway, look. So I'm going to say that the Blessed Mother is the greatest Christian in history, the Theotokos, the God-bearer, the Mother of our Lord, the fount of the Church. The second greatest Christian in history is probably St. Paul, in terms of his impact. Yeah, almost done, about to land this plane. You've heard my story. You got to understand, St. Paul was what? A Pharisee of Pharisees, born in the right tribe, circumcised on the right day. And I don't know if you ever remember your scriptures, but when he was talking about the law, he said, as to the law, faultless. 630 separate laws, faultless. That's kind of a high performer, right? And so Paul, of course, has the road to Damascus, becomes an amazing evangelist. And then he tells us in 2 Corinthians 12, he says, he's talking about someone else, but we know that he's actually talking about himself. He says, I know a man who was caught up into the third heaven and entered paradise, where he heard inexpressible things, things that it is not permitted for anyone to hear. So whatever happened to him, he was drawn into these phenomenal experiences. But then, when you're going to know the next part, right? He says, to stop me from being conceited, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of the Satan. A messenger, there's some kind of temptation there, Paul, something there for you. And of course, Paul, he and Jesus are pretty tight, so he says here in verse 7, but I said 3 times I pleaded with the Lord, take it from me. But he said to me, you all know this line, my grace is sufficient unto you, for my power is at full stretch in weakness. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because as I walked up on the stage at St. Louis, as I walked up there, I have never been as weak as I was at that moment, never just more empty. And the minute I got to that place, it was just like something took over. And I need you to understand, if you're sitting there going, well, Jonathan, what about my own skills and gifts? Oh, listen. Do you want to know what he does if you get to this place? Do you know what he does with your teaching ability? Do you know what he does with your beautiful pastoral care for young people, your coaching skills, your artistic skills, your music skills? Do you know what he's going to do with them, friends? He will elevate them. He will just make you better. Why would you resist? Yeah. I just want to say this to you, friends, just before we finish with Paul. You are going to be taken to this place anyway. You see, death is going to confront you with powerlessness, and it is going to confront you with trust. No one rides for free. Every soul in this room will encounter exactly what I'm talking about. But what I have figured out is I don't want to wait. I don't want to get there and look back and say, Jesus, I'm sorry. All those years I could have been surrendered and I could have trusted and I could have done so much more of what you had for me, but I couldn't trust you. Friends, I didn't get there because I'm smart. I got there because I was driven to my knees through decades of suffering. I want to save you the time. Reorient your teaching, your life to dependence, what I call the path of dependence. Every conversation, every moment, all the time. Help my marriage, help my parenting, help my teaching, help me all the time. And the peace. Do you wonder why the society is so anxious? Have you ever wondered? Do you not see a coincidence that as the society has rejected God, anxiety's gone stratospheric? Maybe there's a clue there. I'm preaching on you all now. Almost done. Just listen to this. Stay with me. Paul finishes by saying, come on, Paul, the greatest of the evangelists, the strongest, the most perfect. He says, therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. He has got you. He has got you. He will carry you. He will make you better. St. Augustine puts it like this. If you're taking notes, just listen. St. Augustine said, "He who made you without your cooperation will not save you without your cooperation." He who made you without your cooperation will not save you. You know what he wants? He just wants a gap this big. Let's finish on this. Summary. Teaching's difficult. He's called you. You're in the right place. You can leave, you can accept, you can change. You ain't leaving. You don't have to accept unhappiness. You can change it by cooperating with Him, by getting state better and getting in the right story. Come home, the come home story, and then run the right strategy of dependence. Let me leave you with this. Take the leap. As I was preparing in the hotel over and over again, I have prayed for you. I promise you I have prayed for you on my knees. I have prayed that the Holy Spirit would impart something to you today. And this really came to me in the hotel. I don't know who I'm talking to in the room, but just listen. You are not alone. You were never alone. You will never be alone. My prayer for all of you is that you'll go back in there tomorrow and that you will play your part in art, music, coaching, teaching, principling, bishoping, priesting, in helping him get his kids back. And we started with this idea of I know why I'm here. Can I ask you to finish with this, that tomorrow, when you close the door on your car or you walk in the front doors of the school, can I ask you to start a habit? And I'm going to encourage you to do this every single day, because you will forget me, but you may remember this. I want you to walk in the door each day and just say a little prayer and then say these words to yourself. I know why I am here.